Ty Dillon might be heading to GMS Racing for 2022's Cup Series program. Denny Hamlin says that Kurt Busch's crew chief and charter have been acquired but have not announced the details yet. And NASCAR may in the future be able to head to the Miami F1 track. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR stories to discuss today on the channel. Let's go and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to also start off the Daytona Xfinity Series race as they have a new title sponsor once again for next year. It once again will be called the Beef It's What's for Dinner 300. They've renewed that sponsorship. It's unknown how long that sponsorship. I think it's multi-year extension with It's Beef It's What's for Dinner. But they're going to continue sponsoring the Xfinity Series for the next couple years. It's really cool to see that they're going to be sponsored. It's definitely a really interesting title for sure. That Beef It's What's for Dinner is going to be sponsored once again. Really cool. Happy to see that for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Phoenix Championship race. As it was reported on Sunday afternoon that the Phoenix Championship race has announced that the Cup Championship race has officially sold out. Xfinity and Truck Series tickets are still available currently at the moment, but they have sold out the Cup Series Championship race. It does not surprise me that they have announced a sellout, to be perfectly honest with you. It does not surprise me because it's been expected that this race is going to sell out. Of course, it's a championship race. You're going to have pretty much regardless sellouts at these current events. So it's really cool to see that the Cup Championship race sold out, considering last year they were only able to, I think, have only 8,000 fans, so 20% capacity at the events, with COVID-19 being a very big case. So it's really cool to see that the Cup Championship race has been able to sell. I'm really happy about that, and great to see that a lot of fans are going to be able to go out to that event. It's really awesome. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Larson. As Kyle Larson is able to win another World of Outlaws race, he was able to win his first World of Outlaws race since being able to go out there and win the Knoxville Nationals. Kyle Larson won night one of the National Opens at William Grove. It does not surprise me Kyle Larson won the event. Kyle Larson, of course, one of the best dirt racers out there, and he's usually, regardless of when he gets in a car, whatever car he runs, he's usually going to be a favorite in those dirt racing events. So I'm really happy overall that Kyle Larson is able to win that event. I'm not surprised that he won, to be perfectly honest with you. Really cool to see that. And hopefully I'm not sure how many more races Kyle Larson is going to run. Of course, we're getting really close to the end of the Cup Series season. He's still already competing for the Cup Series Championship as he's looking to hopefully advance out of the round of 12, though he's only 22 points above the cutoff line currently at the moment. I'm not sure if this will be his last race. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But really awesome to see Kyle Larson be able to win that event, and great to see that Kyle Larson got it done. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about a very dark story in regards to John West Townley. John West Townley on Saturday evening unfortunately passed away after getting shot and killed at a home at the age of 31 years old. The story is very dark and very tragic. More details have come out in regards to this. Apparently, John West Townley had an accident. Apparently, he had tried to break into a house of his ex-girlfriend. Apparently, had filed for divorce apparently the week before, and apparently he broke into a house. Maybe, I don't know exactly what to do, but the guy basically shot and killed him. The woman, unfortunately, also his ex-wife, unfortunately, was apparently also shot in critical condition. We haven't had really any updates in regards to that. Those are really only details that I'm going to share in regards to that. My prayers do go out to the families involved in this. I don't know what John West Townley was doing. I don't know why you tried to break into the house. Really stupid. But at the same time, my prayers and condolences do go out to the families of both of them, and really wish them to hopefully there are things able to happen right there. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Rajah Caruth. As Rajah Caruth is expected to run a partial schedule in the Truck Series in 2022. It was already announced that Rajah Caruth is going to be running multiple races for Tommy Joe Martin's and Sasha Vaccarella's team, Alpha Prime Racing, in the number 44 Chevy. He'll run at least 3 or 4 starts, mainly on short tracks, since I believe he's about 16 or 17 years old at the moment. He will run a partial schedule. Then in 2023, he's expected to go full-time. I think it's really cool to see that Rajah Caruth is going to be going out there to try to get some experience in the Truck Series, considering it's going to probably be at tracks where he's not going to be running in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Again, it's not confirmed what team he's going to be running for. It's unclear at the moment what team will run for. I would assume it's probably going to be some more of the smaller, the back marker teams he's probably going to run for. But it's just going to be good to go out there to try to overall get some experience in regards to that. I think it's going to be good and really cool for the sport that Rajah Caruth is trying to get experience. And I want to see Rajah succeed. He's coming off a very strong run at Salem. I think he ended up finishing in the top 5 at that event, finishing 3rd, if I'm not mistaken, getting his first career podium finish in the Argus Series. So really cool to see that Rajah's going to get more experience. Unclear what team he's going to run for, but it's really awesome to see that Rajah Caruth is going to be running in the Truck Series a little bit next year. Again, we don't know what team it's exactly going to be, but he will be running part-time. Really awesome for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Berry. As Josh Berry is going to once again be driving to one for Junior Motorsports this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. I think it's safe to say at this point that Josh Berry is probably going to be in the one the rest of this year. Remember, Michael Annett is still currently recovering from a leg injury and after a leg surgery. He is still currently recovering from that at the moment. I'll be honest with you, I think that Michael Annett's probably going to be out of the ride for the rest of the year since we're only about 5 or 6 weeks from the championship being decided at this particular moment. I mean, we're coming up to the round of 8 cutoff, the cutoff race for the Xfinity Series side who gets in the round of 8 for that respective series. And after this week, we're only going to have 4 races in the championship. So I expect that Josh Berry is probably going to be in the one for the rest of the year. I'm not honestly sure what's going to happen to Michael Annett even going into next year, to be perfectly honest with you, because Michael Annett's future in NASCAR is really uncertain at the moment, especially with this leg injury. Now, there still is a very strong chance that we could see 5 full-time cars in the Xfinity Series going into 2022. That being said, though, it's really unclear at this given moment what's going to be happening to Josh Berry. I'm wishing him the best of luck, and hopefully Josh Berry will have a good run. I would expect Josh Berry to be very, very decent. He actually ran pretty decent, I think. He's ran a couple road course races, and I think he was running pretty well at Mid-Ohio when he ran for that 31 team. So hopefully he'll do very, very well. Hopefully help the one team get a strong position in the owner's points, because he's been really good this year. 2 wins so far in Xfinity. Hope he's able to get a really strong run this weekend at the Charlotte Roval, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Ty Dillon. As Ty Dillon is going to be driving a 23 Ferrari Motorsports this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Sponsorship has not been revealed for this car, but it's really cool to see that Ty Dillon is continuing to get really good opportunities. And he's ran really, really well in this 23 car over the last couple of years. You look at his statistics so far, he's been able to finish even in the top 10 in a couple races. Look back at Charlotte earlier this year, and I think he ended up finishing in the top 10 with Jordan Anderson Racing in that 31 car earlier this year at Las Vegas a couple weeks ago. So really cool to see that Ty Dillon is getting another opportunity to drive. I think Ty Dillon has a shot for a top 10, especially since I think he's also a pretty decent road course racer. He led a lot of the race at Mid-Ohio in that race where there was a lot of rain and stuff. That being said, I'm really happy to see that Ty Dillon's back at the 23 car. I'm wishing the best of luck and good luck to Ty Dillon this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Roush Hezemans. As Roush Hezemans is going to be driving the 6-6 for NBM Motorsports this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Roush Hezemans, I believe, failed to qualify to get into the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, so he will be attempting to finally make his first career NASCAR Xfinity, well, the second or third career Xfinity Series start. I think he's made one start already earlier this year at Phoenix, but he'll be attempting once again to qualify in for the event. Actually, I think he's able to make it, I think that he's made it in the entry. So this will be his first or second career NASCAR Xfinity Series start. Roush Hezemans, of course, is a driver who's won a championship in the Whelen Euro Series. He's a very good driver to Whelen Euro Series. So that series does have a lot of road courses. So I expect that experience really that is going to come into play for Roush Hezemans. So I'm wishing the best of luck to Roush Hezemans. Hope he's able to have a really strong run. It'd be really cool to see him get a top 25 or top 30. I know those are little expectations for NBM Motorsports, but I've seen the NBM Motorsports camp, especially with Timmy Hill. They have been able to run really, really well. So I'm wishing him the best of luck, and hopefully Roush Hezemans is going to be able to have a very strong run this weekend for NBM Motorsports in the Xfinity Series at the Charlotte Roval. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Joey Hand. As Joey Hand is making his NASCAR Cup Series debut this weekend at the Charlotte Roval, driving the number 52 for Rick Ware Racing. Many people are going to say, oh, who is Joey Hand? Joey Hand is a legend in the sports car series. He's won the Rolex 24. I believe he's won the 24 Hours of Le Mans. He's won just about every kind of motors, every kind of sports car race he basically can win. He's one of the best in sports cars. And while it looks like he's not going to be in a very, very good car, I would not be entirely shocked if Joey Hand he's going to be able to have a very, very strong run, considering Joey Hand knows how to get it done on road course. Now, like I said, this car is not really that good. That being said, seeing a guy like Joey Hand come in here and go into an organization like this, I know, like I said, it's not a great car, but to see him go into an organization like this is really, really awesome for the sport, to be bringing a sports car guy out like this. I would not be entirely shocked if Joey Hand is able to get a top 30 this weekend. If he's able to get a top 30 this weekend at this track, I think it'd be really, really awesome for the sport. Hopefully Joey Hand gets a really good opportunity. Hopefully he does really, really well. A top 30 would be really, really good for this team. We've seen the Rick Ware cars at certain points, especially over the last couple of years, be able to do that. So really good luck to Joey Hand, and hopefully he's going to be able to have a very strong run this weekend, because I think it'd be really, really cool. Hopefully he's able to have a good run this weekend at the Roval, because I think he'd be really, really cool for the sport. Now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the next-gen car. The NBC and Toyota basically gave us a little bit of insight in regards to the sounds of the next-gen car. And I will have to say that the sounds of the 2022 Toyota Camry and the next-gen car definitely sound really, really interesting. I'm not going to play them here, but it definitely sounds really, really interesting. We've been able to hear these sounds so far in all the next-gen tests we have been able to see so far. So I think it's really cool to hear the next-gen sounds. I think it actually really, really sounds interesting. I know a lot of people have not been able to like the sounds that have come out of the next-gen car, but I think the sounds overall do really, really sound pretty pleasant overall to me. So in my opinion, I think the sounds do sound really, really cool. I'm really happy about it. I'm looking forward to hear this car next year. And like I said, I know a lot of people have not overall been entirely a huge fan of the sounds of the next-gen car, but I do think it sounds really, really solid, and I like the overall sound of the car. It sounds really cool, and I'm looking forward to hearing it in the car for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Corey Heim. As it was reported on the MAV TV broadcast for the ARC race that Corey Heim is expected to race full-time in the Truck Series in 2022. It's unclear where he will be racing in 2022, but he's expected to run full-time in the Truck Series in 2022. I have a feeling I know where he's going to end up next year in the Truck Series. I think he's either going to end up with the 16 of Vittori Racing, which we'll talk about that team in just a little bit, or he's going to end up full-time with Kyle Busch Motorsports in 2022. I'm leaning more toward him going to Kyle Busch Motorsports in 2022. And the reason I'm leaning more toward him going to Kyle Busch Motorsports is for a couple of reasons. One, he's already made a couple starts for KBM so far in the Truck Series this year. He's already made one start back at Darlington. It was actually a friend of the majority of that point before getting taken out in the big one on Darlington on the front stretch around 30 laps to go in the event. And he also made a start at Watkins Glen where he's able to get a top 10, not to mention the day before he was able to win the ARC race. So I feel very confident that Corey Heim will be with Kyle Busch Motorsports. The other big reason I think he's going to end up with Kyle Busch Motorsports next year is because going into next year, I think that John Hunter Nemechek is going to move up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and I think he's going to go to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2022. Unclear what number he'll probably end up driving. I would assume he's probably going to end up in the number 20 car just because that number is going to be available, and Harrison Burns is going to end up going full-time in Cup with Wood Brothers, and you also have the fact that Ty Gibbs, I think, is going to end up in the 18 since Daniel Hemrick is going to be going to Kaulig Racing in 2022. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but I'm really excited about Corey Heim. I think Corey Heim is very driver. A lot of people talk about Ty Gibbs, but Corey Heim's also been really good at ARCA, so I think he definitely deserves a promotion. He's won 6-7 races in ARCA this year, so I'm waiting to see what happens, but really cool to see that Corey Heim is probably going to go up full-time in the Truck Series in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about front stretch interviews. It was reported by Jenna Fryer that there has been discussions are being held in regards to handling ambient noises from the grandstands. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, you saw the big headlines. Of course, Brandon Brown got his first career NASCAR Xfinity Series victory, and for the last couple of years, NASCAR has held front stretch interviews on the racetrack. But it did create some controversy because they were chanting something that was very, very inappropriate. They were saying F Joe Biden. Now, of course, the NBC commentator was saying that he was saying let's go. They were saying let's go Brandon. But in reality, what they were actually chanting was they were saying F Joe Biden. Now, I'll be very honest with you. If you want to avoid these problems, and I said it on Twitter yesterday, if you want to avoid the potential problems of there being issues of this coming up in the foreseeable future, in my honest opinion, we should not anymore do front stretch interviews and do interviews in Victory Lane. I have not been overall a big fan of them doing front stretch interviews for a long time. In my opinion, I think we need to be doing interviews in Victory Lane, because if we did interviews in Victory Lane, I think it would work out a lot more and make a lot more sense to do interviews in Victory Lane. They used to do it for a long time. I don't understand why for the last couple of years. I think they started doing them in 2018. NBC started doing that, and then Fox started catching on to that about later portion of 2019, and they started doing that. I personally think that we should be moving the interviews over to the Victory Lane, so I think it would make a lot more sense in my honest opinion, and we could end up getting rid of these controversies that have been happening in the sport, because we could have avoided this whole controversy if we did the interview legitimately in Victory Lane. I've been saying this, we should have stopped doing this when we got fans back into the sport. We should have stopped doing this a few years ago. I think a lot of people have been against it. I think at this point, that should have been the straw that broke the camel's back. I think after this weekend, starting this weekend at the Charlotte Roval, we need to, by personal opinion, we need to start doing interviews in Victory Lane like we originally should have been doing. That's just my honest opinion on that, though. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Marco Andretti. It was reported by Tony Donahue, I believe he works for the Indy Star. He reported that Tony Stewart apparently has interest with Ford backing to field Marco Andretti in select Xfinity Series races in 2022. If you've not been paying attention, Marco Andretti a few months ago, back in July, when the SRX was basically coming to I think they were beginning their season or coming to the conclusion of their season, Marco Andretti says that he has had some interest in going into the NASCAR Xfinity Series and running on a part-time basis. And this does not surprise me that this would potentially be the team that he would go to in 2022. Now, my big question in regards to Tony Stewart's Xfinity Series program, are they going to run one full-time car with Riley Herbst or somebody else? Or are they going to run 2 cars next year, have a bunch of their Cup guys, and maybe some select starts for that, and maybe Ford is going to field some development in that series for 2 potential cars in Xfinity going into 2022? It is very, very unclear. But I would really like to see Marco Andretti actually run in NASCAR and run a few select starts. I really thought that it was going to be this year that he was going to run on a part-time basis, but I thought he was maybe going to run with Joe Gibbs Racing. But it makes a lot more sense to run with Tony Stewart and Stewart-Haas Races. Of course, he races in SRX, which is owned by Tony Stewart. I think it would make a lot more sense for Marco Andretti to compete in that series respectively. I think it'd be really cool to see him run. I'm not sure how he would run, but he ran really well in the stock car races in the SRX. He was actually competing for victories in some of those certain events. So I think it'd be really, really awesome, and I think it'd be really cool to see Marco Andretti get an opportunity to race. I think it'd be great for the sport if he's able to run in NASCAR, and it'd be cool to see an Andretti race. I know there were a few years ago there have been potential reports that Andretti Autosport was maybe looking to join NASCAR a few years ago with Petty basically backing them. But that being said, it'd be really cool to see Marco Andretti. He's been out of IndyCar racing full time. I would assume he's maybe going to attempt the Indy 500 in 2022. He's supposed to run a few more races, but sponsorship unfortunately kind of dried up, and he's been jumping over to other motorsports. So hopefully we'll see Marco Andretti race. I think it'd be really cool to see him race in NASCAR for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jimmie Johnson and Romain Grosjean. As tomorrow mornings through afternoon, Jimmie Johnson and Romain Grosjean are going to have their Indy 500 rookie orientation tests tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow morning. For those of you who have not been paying attention, Jimmie Johnson and Romain Grosjean are going to looking to be attempting to run the Indianapolis 500. Romain Grosjean made his oval debut at Gateway and actually ran really, really well. Of course, he ended up finishing a lap down, but he was really the star of the show, making some of the most aggressive moves I've ever seen. And Romain Grosjean has been very, very fun to watch, even on the one oval race that he's been able to run. And Romain Grosjean has said that he wants to run the Indianapolis 500 and is currently relocating his family from Switzerland over to the United States. He's looking to come over here to the United States and race on the full season. And we know that he's going to be attempting to run full-time at IndyCar next year, driving to 28 for Andretti Autosport. Jimmie Johnson, we'll talk about him for a second. Jimmie Johnson has already tested an IndyCar on oval. He tested at Texas Motor Speedway, and if the fastest time came out, he would have had overall the 4th fastest time in that particular event and would have been able to have the 4th fastest qualifying time and would have been able to starting up front. In my opinion, I feel like Jimmie Johnson should have been able to run the ovals this year. I think it would have made a lot more sense for him. I know that he's been concerned about the aero screen, but he's been saying for a long time that there have been more and more good thoughts about him potentially running the Indy 500 for a very, very long time. So I'm really happy to see that both of them are going to be testing this car. It'd be really good for the sport to have a former Formula 1 driver who was, unfortunately, really wasn't doing great in Formula 1. Of course, the cars or the Haas cars were generally some of the slowest cars out on the racetrack. So I'm really hoping that they are both able to pass. I think it'd be really cool for the sport if both of them are able to pass their rookie orientation test. I think it'd be great for the sport, and hopefully they're able to pass, because I think it's going to be overall really great for the sport as a whole. If they're able to pass the rookie orientations, I think it's going to be really awesome for the sport. Hopefully they're able to pass it Wednesday afternoon. If they're able to pass, we'll report on that. If they pass, they both will be competing in the Indy 500. I think it'll be great for the sport as a whole if they're able to pass. Now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tabo Boyd. As Tabo Boyd and his goal to be able to run some truck series starts with help from Marcos Motos has him reached. At some point going into 2022 or the next couple of years, Tabo Boyd will be able to make his final 6 starts to reach 800 career NASCAR starts all across all 3 top-tier series and be able to reach it. It's unclear what team he's going to drive for at this given moment, what manufacturer, what tracks he's going to run going into 2022 or the future, but Tabo Boyd will be able to race in the Truck Series going forward. I am super excited to see that Tabo Boyd is going to be running in the Truck Series once again. It's been a few years since Tabo Boyd has raced. The last time I believe he races in the NASCAR Xfinity Series when he drove for DJM Racing. I think he crashed out back a couple years ago and didn't have a very, very strong run. It has been a few years, and also the last time he also raced in the Truck Series was quite a few years ago. I think it was back in 2013 or 2014 when he drove for Red Horse Racing. So I'm really excited to see that Tabo Boyd is going to be making his return. I'm not entirely sure what team he'll drive for. I think one team that would be a really good fit for him, though, would be Nice Motorsports. Nice Motorsports had a big knack for getting drivers that haven't raced in their series respectively for a long time, or drivers have been retired. Guys like Eric Darnell, James Busher, Trevor Bayne have been able to race respectively for their given team. So I'm really happy to see that Tabo Boyd is going to make starts. Again, I'm not sure how he's going to perform. Like I said, it's been a few years since he's raced, and he's a much older driver. But it's really cool to see that one of the old guards of the Truck Series who raced in the 2000 when the Truck Series was actually really, really good before all these kids came in and took over and started kind of being wreck halls in the series. Let's be honest, a lot of them were wrecking a lot of the cars. Let's be perfectly honest with here. That being said, though, I think it's really awesome to see that Tabo Boyd is making his return. I think it's going to be really awesome for the sport going forward. Happy to see he's coming back. I expect maybe some good runs. Hopefully he will, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Parker Kligerman. As Parker Kligerman, after the Truck Series race, was not very happy with Jennifer Jo Cobb. He took to Twitter talking about how she drove like an idiot in the race and was not very happy with the 10 truck. Now, if you watch the Truck Series race, the big one happened with around 30 to 35 laps ago in this race. Todd Gillen got a really, really big push by Chase Purdy, and he ran into the back of Austin Hill, and Austin Hill shot up to the outside wall and caused the big one to happen, and many trucks got involved. Parker Kligerman was able to basically save it and didn't get damaged, and then Jennifer Jo Cobb in the 10 literally shot down right through there and basically T-boned Parker Kligerman, ARCA breaking here. I know that a lot of us remember that basically throughout the weekend, a lot of us, when she was not able to be cleared for Talladega to run for Rick Ware Racing in the Cup Series, we were not very happy with NASCAR. I think a lot of us are taking that back because let's be perfectly honest with you, what she did was not only dangerous, but absolutely unexcusable. You know that you're not supposed to completely drive into them. You know that, I understand you want to go full send and try to get through a wreck, but you are no better. You've been in this series respectively for a very, very long time, and you could have seriously hurt somebody. He's very lucky that it wasn't on the door side of the car. He's very lucky that it wasn't on the driver's door, but it could have been very, very dangerous right there. So I 100% understand why Parker Kligerman was not happy with Jennifer Jo Cobb, and I would be angry too if that happened to me. I would be absolutely pissed off and livid if that absolutely happened to me. So, in my opinion, I think Parker Kligerman has every reason to be justified to be upset, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they Parker for the next week. I don't know, but something has to be done and address it. And it's funny because Clayton Hughes, the next day after that truck race, he basically had a medical issue. Basically, I think he decided to take off, but very interesting to see that, and Parker Kligerman being mad. I don't blame him, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about President of Talladega, Brian Critchstone. Now, after the Truck Series race, he talked about Tay Fogelman's truck, and this is what he said. He says that the Tay Fogelman's win is the way that a truck should look when it finishes a race at Talladega Superspeedway. Now, I don't want to sound like a Bandit fan who's upset about this, but I'll be honest with you, when I saw these comments in regards to Brian Critchstone, I was absolutely shocked. I don't know if it was a heat of a moment thing of what he absolutely said, but the fact that he said it like that is absolutely unexcusable, the way that he said that. Even if it was a heat of a moment thing, there are things that you know that you should be able to say and not be able to say, especially since this track is extremely dangerous. And it seems like what Brian Critchstone is thinking is like, hey, I don't care about driver safety. I don't care about these cars. Like, I just want to see the guy go to victory lanes. All I care about is the money. That's what exactly seems like. And to me, that is absolutely unexcusable. And quite a few drivers actually thought the same way that I thought. Kyle Busch was not very happy. You had a couple other drivers, not to mention, that were not very happy about Brian Critchstone's comments overall. And I think it's really, really stupid to think that. Of course, a lot of people are like, well, Brian Christian's just cares, basically, he's happy that a guy won. It's like, well, yeah, it's a guy first career win. At the same time, a car is literally destroyed. It shows it, to me, it seems like he doesn't care about safety. I don't know if it really meant what he exactly said. I think it may have just been a heated moment thing. But to have comments like that, of course you're going to overall get backlash. You know a lot better. You know better as a president of the track who's been a president who's been in the sport for nearly 20 to 25 years. I believe Brian Christian has been in the sport for a very, very long time. I just don't overall understand why Brian Christian decided to make those comments. I think those comments could have been avoided, but I understand it's a heated moment thing. I totally get that. I totally understand it, but at the same time, you know better as being the president of Talladega. You should know a lot better, in my honest and sincere opinion, but it is what it is. I hope Brian Christian at this one point apologizes. He hasn't apologized up to this point for some of those comments. I don't think he exactly was trying to be an ass at that point, but at the same time, pretty stupid comments, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Matt Crafton and John Nemechek's kind of a little bit of their feud. Now, Matt Crafton, after the Truck Series race, was not very happy with John Nemechek and basically got sideways on the... we'll talk a little bit more about the history between these two. So, their history goes all the way back to Bristol. If you watched the Truck Series race at Bristol Dirt earlier this year, Matt Crafton got into the back of John Nemechek and spun him, and I believe John Nemechek got clobbered and the truck basically got destroyed. John Nemechek basically had a sarcastic clap, and apparently the crew chiefs and the crews behind the scenes and stuff, apparently got into a feud in the garage right after the race, during the race when that incident had happened. Then we go to Talladega now at this point. John Nemechek got Matt Crafton sideways. Apparently, Matt Crafton may have had an unstable truck, and John Nemechek was really, really aggressive in this race and got Matt Crafton sideways. Right after the race, John Nemechek got dumped by Tay Fogelman overall for the victory. Not mad about what Tay Fogelman did. You got to do what you got to do to win, even though it was a little bit dirty what Tay Fogelman did. Matt Crafton came up and basically slapped him behind John Nemechek in the back and gave a very sarcastic good job thing to John Nemechek. And then John Nemechek basically called Matt Crafton old. To me, in my honest opinion, I honestly can't be mad at Matt Crafton, to be perfectly honest with you, for being upset, especially since he's in the playoffs and he nearly got wrecked in the Truck Series event. I like John Nemechek's comments, though. I think they're very, very funny to me. I think it's really cool to see that there's a little bit of a rivalry forming. I'm not sure how this is going to unfold, considering we're going to Martinsville. The next Truck Series race is going to be in Martinsville. And even Matt Crafton said in his interview, what comes around goes around. We may see these two get into it. We may see a fight after the Truck Series race. And Martinsville is known to a track that has short track temper. So to me, I'd be really cool to see a fight. I think it'd be really funny if these two were the two that were able to fight. Because again, you have a young, older driver who's been in the Truck Series for nearly 20 years. And you have John Nemechek, who's been basically overall the best driver in the Truck Series. I think it'd overall be really, really funny to see both these guys fight. I think it'd be really, really funny, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Roush Fenway Racing. As Roush Fenway Racing has decided, and it was announced Sunday early afternoon, that they have decided they are going to be swapping crew chiefs and road crews starting this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Scott Graves is going to be moving from the 6 car over to the 17, and Luke Lambert is going to be moving from the 17 to the 6. Now, there's a lot of history between these swaps. Scott Graves actually was the crew chief for Chris Buescher in the NASCAR Xfinity Series when he won the championship in 2015 and crew chiefed for him in 2014. He did not crew chief for him in 2006. I think he may have crew chief. Actually, no, Bob Osborne crew chief for him in 2016. And Scott Graves worked with drivers like Daniel Suarez, moved up to the Cup Series, I think in 2016 or 2017. And he's been all around and stuff, crew chief for Daniel Suarez early portions of his career. And then moved over to Roush Fenway Racing, the crew chief for Ryan Newman, I believe starting in 2017 or 2019, when Ryan Newman moved over to that organization then. So Scott Graves has been working with Ryan Newman ever since, and now he'll be going back to work with Chris Buescher. I think it's really good that an old friend is going to be working with a old driver, because again, they used to work together in the Xfinity Series, and they got a championship, so I think that this pairing is going to work well. In regards to Luke Lambert moving back to the 6-car work with Ryan Newman, I think Luke Lambert is actually a very, very solid crew chief. If you look at his stats so far with Chris Buescher this year, I mean, they missed the playoffs, but they've been consistently a top 20 team pretty much all year long. And I do think that Luke Lambert's actually a really solid crew chief. He's made some pretty solid strategy calls. He got Ryan Newman a win in 2017 at Phoenix, got Ryan Newman's last career Cup Series win up to date at this point. Almost got to win a couple times in the Cup Series over the last couple years. I think that what this move is going to do, I think it's going to be big And I will tell you, I think that Luke Lambert is probably going to be the crew chief for Brad Keselowski when he moves over to Roush Fenway Racing. I think that they're making this move early so that Brad Keselowski overall can work with a very solid crew chief going forward. I think it's really good to see that they're making this move. I think it's going to be big for the series, for this team as a whole. It's good wholesale changes, in my opinion. Great to see this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to move on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Austin Hill. It was announced Saturday before the Truck Series race began, about half an hour before the Truck Series race began on Fox, that Austin Hill will not be returning to Hattori Racing in the Truck Series in 2022. He plans to move up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2022, but his plans have not been currently announced at this particular moment. When I saw this report, I was absolutely shocked. I thought there was potential that Austin Hill was going to move up to Xfinity next year, of course, but I thought that he was going to go to Hattori Racing Enterprises in 2022 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, since he drove for that organization many, many times. Now, there, of course, is still a potential chance that he could go there in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But they said in general, Hattori Racing Enterprises. They never just said the Truck Series. I believe they said all together he won't be returning to Hattori Racing Enterprises. You look at Austin Hill so far in the Truck Series driver Hattori Racing. He's won many, many races in the Truck Series. 2 wins so far this year in 2021, scoring back-to-back wins at Watkins and winning at Knoxville before that. And also, he won a lot of races in 2020, but unfortunately got eliminated before going to the championship race, and unfortunately got eliminated before going to the round of 8 this year. And Austin Hill has said for a while that he does eventually want to move up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series going into the 2022 season. He's been wanting to go up there. He's ran quite a few races, and I think he absolutely deserves the opportunity to go into the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Now, what rides could Austin Hill go to going into 2022? I don't know how many rides are going to be, unfortunately, available for him going into next year. There's already rides starting to fill up for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Maybe Hattori Racing maybe lets him come back. I'm not entirely sure, but you do have Kaulig Racing that does potentially have one ride opening up. You have Daniel Hemrick, who's going to be in the 11 next year, who's taking over for Justin Haley, and you have AJ Allmendinger, who's going to be driving the 16 once again next year. We don't know the future of Jeb Burton currently at the moment. We don't know if he's going to be leaving the team at this current moment. There's a good chance he will be. We don't know what the future of Jeb Burton holds currently at the moment, so he may be leaving the team at the end of this year. You also do have potential that RCR could have 2 rides going into next year. Now, there is potential that a Cup Series veteran may go into there. Someone who's very likable could be going to RCR next year, and Meisner may be leaving the organization at the conclusion of the 2021 season, even though he does have the funding. Meisner does have one, but he has not been particularly that great this year, to be honest with you. So maybe he goes to RCR next year. But I do think that there's also potential that he could go to Sampan Racing next year, though I do think that Santino Frici could be going full-time in a foreseeable future with that team, or he could go to that team next year. He's part of the Toyota camp. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but I think Austin Hill's had a really, really awesome career at Hattori Racing. We'll wait to see what happens, but hopefully he'll end up at a good ride next year, because I absolutely think he deserves a good opportunity and a good chance to go at that organization. Hopefully he's going to be able to have those opportunities going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about GMS Racing's Truck Series team. Now, we're going to talk about the main announcement Friday here in just a little bit, but we're going to talk about the rest of the GMS Racing's Truck Series team. The future of the Truck Series team is really unknown at this given moment. Let's first start off with Chase Purdy, as Chase Purdy and his partners and sponsors have not confirmed for next year going into 2022. Zane Smith is another one. We do not know his plans going into 2022 as well. Tyler Ankrum and Liuana, he may be leaving the organization at the end of the 2022 season. And Rafael Lessard, we'll talk about him in just a second. Let's start off with Chase Purdy. It would be very shocking to see Chase Purdy leave the organization. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, he's not a good driver. And I absolutely understand. I don't think Chase Purdy has been that good. I think he's been one of the most disappointing drivers so far in the Truck Series this year. I think he only has one top 10, and that came at Gateway, where he only top 10 so far in the season. And he's been in a really good truck. Remember, he basically took over for Brett Moffitt, who competed for the championship last year. And he absolutely has not been that good with this organization in 23. He really wasn't that good last year on a part-time basis. I know COVID has been a thing, and he really hasn't raced that much over the last couple of years, but he has not been entirely that impressive so far in the Truck Series. Zane Smith, we'll talk about him just for a second. I think Zane Smith does have a potential shot of going to Kaulig Racing Xfinity Series program, or in general, moving up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year. There's been rumors that maybe he was even potentially going to go to Chip Ganassi Racing's Cup program before that got acquired for 2022 by Trackhouse Racing. There had been potential he was going to go up to those teams going into 2022. I think Zane Smith's going to end up potentially going to end up a call racing his third car next year if Jeb Burton doesn't leave, or even Austin Hill could end up there. We don't know entirely sure, but I think Zane Smith could be going up to Xfinity. Tyler Ankrum, definitely interesting. I think Tyler Ankrum's not been that great, let's be perfectly honest. I don't think Tyler Ankrum has been entirely that impressive so far in the Gander Outdoors Truck Series. I don't think he's been that great to see so far in the Truck Series. So that would not shock me if he left the team. He barely made the playoffs last year, and I think a lot of people had high hopes for him considering he won a race with DJR Racing when they were trucks, and they weren't really that great back a year or two ago. But I don't think Tyler Ankrum's been that impressive. And then I'll talk about Rafael Sard just a second, because Rafael Sard in his Twitter bio, he actually does have GMS Racing linked to that Twitter bio. So he could be going to GMS's truck program next year. What do I expect GMS Racing to look like? We know that Jack Wood's going to be in the 24. We'll talk about Grant Enfinger, where he'll be at with this team next year. I do feel confident. I do still say this. I do think that Chase Birdie is going to come back to the Truck Series next year. I think he's going to be with this team. And I think Rafael Sard will be the other driver. I think that you're going to see a change with this team. I think two of the drivers, Daphne Smith and Ankrum, are going to be leaving the organization. I think Ankrum's future is going to be currently unknown. They're talking about moving on from that organization. But I think Rafael Sard could potentially be moving over either to one of those other trucks, maybe the 21, or going over and taking over for Sheldon Creed next year. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But those are what we could be expecting going into next year. Speaking of Grant Enfinger, it was finally revealed on Friday afternoon at 4 in the afternoon that Grant Enfinger is officially going to be driving for GMS Racing for 2 years in 2022 and 2023, driving the number 23 Champions Power Equipment for the next 2 seasons. I can tell you right now that I'm absolutely and extremely excited to see that Grant Enfinger is officially going to be driving for GMS Racing's Truck Series program in 2022. It was pretty much expected. There's been teasers for a while that he's been arguably the favorite to go to the organization. A lot of insiders have said that he was expected to go to this organization full-time for 2022. I'm surprised that it's a 2-year deal, but I will say I am extremely excited. Grant Enfinger got shafted after last year from driving for ThorSport. Last year in 2020, he made the Final Four and actually was on the verge of potentially winning the championship in 2020. For a late restart happened, he got past late in the event. I think he had a tire go down in that event as well. And how do they reward him? They cut him to a half season and splitting a ride with Christian Eckes in him. Even though Johnny Sauter got to keep his full-time rate, even though Johnny Sauter was absolute butt cheeks in 2020, let's be perfectly honest, he was not that good in 2020. He was not very good, and yet he still got to keep his ride full-time. Ben Rose got to keep his ride full-time, even though he had his antics, so I will say that Ben Rose actually has been pretty solid so far in the Truck Series this year. And I don't remember the other guy, who else got it? I don't remember exactly who else is driving for the ThorSport. Or Matt Crafton. Of course, Matt Crafton's going to keep his ride. Matt Crafton's been a seasoned driver with the organization. But I will say that the acquisition of Grant Enfinger driving for this organization full-time is huge for this team. I absolutely think Grant Enfinger will be a championship contender. He's been consistently a top 10 driver in the Truck Series, driving for CR7 Motorsports and ThorSport. He's been a top 10 driver in the points all year long. He couldn't compete, however, for the championship full-time just because he's not been able so far. Unfortunately, he didn't compete at Daytona Road Course, so you have to run all the races, and you have to basically have a good excuse to be able to get a waiver. I know a lot of people have said that he should have been able to get a waiver to run for the championship, but you have to have those waivers, and it is what it is, but he wasn't able to get those acquisitions. I think that Grant Enfinger will be great for this team. First, veteran experience. He's a guy that's been in the series for a very, very long time, and their oldest driver going into next year is potentially going to be Chase Birdie. Chase Birdie's like 23 or 24 years old. He is in his 30s, and Grant Enfinger brings a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience to this organization. I think that's why GMS, besides Sheldon Creed and even Zane Smith, I think that's why they've been struggling this year, because they don't have that veteran presence over at that organization right now. Their team is very, very young at the moment, and I think bringing in a driver like Grant Enfinger is going to bring a lot to the table. I think Grant will potentially have a chance to win the championship next year, considering that there's probably going to be multiple drivers from the Truck Series moving up to Xfinity. We have John Nemechek is potentially moving up to Xfinity. You have Austin Hills probably leaving the Truck Series. And you also have other drivers that could be leaving the Truck Series to go into Xfinity in 2022. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but I'm really excited to see that Grant Enfinger is officially going back to the Truck Series full-time. I think it's going to be great for the sport to see a guy like Grant Enfinger in the series full-time. He will be a great for the sport, to be perfectly honest with you, and great to see he's back in the Truck Series full-time with GMS. And now we're going to jump on to the first of three major stories of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Miami F1 track. Now, it was reported by Racer.com that Miami F1 track is open to hosting IndyCar and NASCAR races if schedules align in the future. The president of the track who basically manages the Miami Dolphins said, I think it's possible, but the limited time window from the scheduling standpoint is really the challenge. You have the really hot summer. He also mentions the U.S. Open, also mentions the NFL as well. And remember, the Miami F1 track, they're going to be hosting for the first time in F1 in a long time. There's going to be two F1 races that are taking place in the same season. They're going to be racing at a street course in Miami. Now, I want to talk about this for a second. I think it'd be really, really awesome if NASCAR did overall get this opportunity to run. But here is what I want to see. I personally do not want to see NASCAR leave Homestead Miami Speedway, which is one reason why I think that there's potential that this may end up faltering overall as a whole. I think that NASCAR would probably not want to leave Homestead Miami Speedway, considering Homestead Miami Speedway, I think overall as a whole, is overall the best track, mile-and-a-half track on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule by far. The racing at that track is absolutely excellent. I mean, there's a reason why that track's getting moved right back into the playoffs, just because the racing this year was really, really good in both series, respectively, as a whole for Xfinity and for the Cup Series. And I think overall as a whole, I think is respectively the best track for mile-and-a-half and intermediate tracks in NASCAR. It doesn't matter what racing package you run or what kind of package you do run. I think that is effectively the best racetrack as a whole when it comes to that. So I do not want to see Homestead Miami Speedway overall be sacrificed for the sake of having this. Don't get me wrong. I think it'd be really, really cool to see this. And I think that there could potentially be a way that you could have both events coincide, considering I would like to see Homestead move earlier in the year. And Miami is a big enough city to where I think you can, and the Miami area is a big enough area and a big enough market to where you probably could be able to host enough fans for both events in general. I just personally don't think that we should get rid of Homestead. I think that if this event's going to happen, I think it'd be great to see the Miami F1 track happen. I'm just worried that it could, unfortunately, what could end up happening as a whole is that we could entirely see NASCAR leave Homestead Miami Speedway, and that track's been really, really good. So if this does happen, I hope that Homestead does not happen. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but I hope that Homestead is not canned, and hopefully Homestead is not out of the sport as a whole. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ty Dillon. During that press conference in regards to Grant Enfinger's announcement, there was talk about the Cup Series program. It was reported by Bob Pockers that GMS Racing's president Mike Beam said that the Cup car will be full-time next year in regards to GMS's Cup Series program. Wouldn't say the driver, though Ty Dillon is currently the front runner and will be at the October 11th and 12th next-gen test at Charlotte. As a matter of fact, Ty Dillon is also going to be at that test. It was revealed yesterday, along with a couple other drivers like Boris Head, who's going to be testing the next-gen car, and front row is not going to be at that next-gen test. Ty Dillon will be testing that next-gen car for GMS Racing for 2022. It has been rumored for the last couple weeks that Ty Dillon is currently right now the front runner to go full-time with the team next year. And as it reported, they are going to be full-time. And apparently they're also very close to acquiring a charter to go full-time for next year. First question, where do I think they're getting a charter for next year? Now, they're having initial potential reports that they are potentially going to get that other charter from Front Row Motorsports. However, I do think that Front Row Motorsports is at least going to keep one of their cars going into 2022, though I do think that they are going to be switching to Toyota for 2022 next year. I think that GMS Racing is getting one of their charters from the Rickware Racing organization. Remember, it was reported back in August, in the middle of August, during the weekend, for the national weekend, it was reported that Rickware Racing is probably going to be downsized into one or two full-time Cup Series cars for 2022 to downsize to focus on improving their program going into the next-gen era. And I think that they got their charter from that organization. Now, talking about Ty Dillon going to GMS Racing, while it's not confirmed, I think that at this point in the coming days, we are going to hear an official announcement in regards to Ty Dillon going full-time with GMS in 2022. I think that Ty Dillon is a pretty decent driver, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think Ty Dillon is a championship caliber driver, and I don't think he's going to really be able to help this team get this team up right and be a championship contender right away. But that being said, I do think Ty Dillon is a very respectable driver. I do think that he brings a lot to the table for this team. He has a lot of experience this year. He's driven for quite a few different teams. He drove for the Our Motorsports camp. And that's another thing that's definitely really interesting. Our Motorsports does have some loose ties with the GMS Racing organization, as they do get some of their parts and pieces from the GMS Racing organization, which is why I do think that that's happening. And a lot of people are wondering, well, how is Ty Dillon going to go full-time with the team? How does he have the sponsorship for it? Ty Dillon's been spotted recently with South Point basically sponsoring him this past weekend, and that's RCR connection. So I do think that RCR and Rich Chillis, who of course is his grandpa, could overall be helping Ty Dillon as a whole. And Sheldon Creed, who's driving for GMS Racing full-time right now in the Truck Series, will be going to RCR's Xfinity Series program next year. So I do think that there are some connections in regards to that. Now, if Ty Dillon does get confirmed, officially confirmed to this organization going into next year, what are my expectations for Ty Dillon? I think that Ty Dillon will be a decent driver for the next year. I think GMS Racing will be a decent team. I don't think Ty Dillon is the best opportunity and the best choice for the organization. That being said, though, I do think that Ty Dillon will get some top 20s and even some top 30s. I don't think his team is going to be a championship caliber team right away. I think they're going to be very similar right from the beginning from a team like Front Row, or they're going to be similar to a team like JT Doherty Racing. I think they're going to have their flashes of brilliance. I think they will at points compete for top 10s. They'll be decent at super speedways. They've shown some pretty decent speed on super speedways over the last couple years. But I don't overall expect the team to be a championship caliber team right away. Now, as time goes on, GMS Racing could become a championship caliber team. And I think they'll be great. Now, I think if they were going to choose somebody else, I think Ryan Preece would be a much better choice overall. I think Ryan Newman even would be a much better choice. But I do think that Ty Dillon being a guy that's a free agent, of course, and a guy that does bring sponsorship, I think that's going to help a lot more in regards to Ty Dillon getting an opportunity as a whole to run with the team. I'm not sure when this will get announced. I think that announcement is coming very, very soon. But I'm very intrigued to see how he'll do next year. I think if Ty Dillon comes to this team, I think, like I said, what I just mentioned a minute ago, I think he'll have some decent stats as a whole with the organization. Hope he's able to have some good runs, and hopefully we'll see Ty Dillon have some good runs with this team next year. If he does go to the team, again, it's not confirmed, but it's expected that Ty Dillon will be going to this team next year. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about 23XI Racing once again. On top of yesterday, then winning yesterday, with Denny Hamlin, with Bubba Wallace picking up his first career NASCAR Cup Series victory. I just want to come on and say that once again, huge congratulations to Bubba Wallace picking up his first career NASCAR Cup Series victory. Big for this team. We've got one little report talk about 23XI Racing. Now, Denny Hamlin yesterday on Sunday afternoon before the Cup race was supposed to happen, Denny Hamlin Sunday told the media that both a charter for the 25 for Kurt Busch for next year for 23XI Racing in 2022 and a crew chief for Kurt Busch are set for 2022. He said he cannot announce them at this current time, but they're very close to announcing. They have got the charter ready to go, and they are set for 2022. First, let's talk about the crew chief speculation. Who do I think Kurt Busch's crew chief is going to be for next year? I think that it's going to be the same crew chief that is currently working for Kurt Busch at this particular moment, because he did say that is someone that he's very comfortable with. I think that he is going to be working next year with Matt McCall. Matt McCall's been his crew chief for the last couple years in the Cup Series, where they've been able to work together and both be able to pick up 3 victories together. Matt McCall has one win with him in 2019 at Kentucky, 2020 last year at Las Vegas, and then this year at Atlanta in pretty dominating fashion. I think that if they had 23XI was smart, they keep Pootie Barker and Bubba Wallace, I think that would make a lot more sense. But Matt McCall is someone that's really comfortable with Kurt Busch, and I think that since next year, of course, Chip Ganassi Racing is going to be gone at the end of this year, I think that Matt McCall is going to be unemployed, and I think that Kurt Busch will be working with Matt McCall next year. I think Matt McCall will be big beneficial. I think he's been very solid. I know that he wasn't that great with Jamie McMurray, but I think Kurt Busch has come in here and made him a much better crew chief as a whole. So I really think that going into next year, I think that he will be working with Kurt Busch next year. I think it's going to be Matt McCall. In regards to them acquiring a charter, where do I think they're getting the charter from? I think, like I've said multiple times on this channel, I think that they are going to have a partnership with Front Row Motorsports next year. I think Front Row Motorsports is going to be switching to Toyota. I think Front Row is going to be downsized to a one-car operation going into next year. And they are going to be selling their charters, the 38 charter, to 23XI Racing, second program, going into next year. I know there have been talk maybe they were going to get a charter from the Rick Ware Racing organization, but there's some other teams that could be getting charters from the Rick Ware organization next year. I think that Front Row will downsize a one-car operation, and I think they will keep Michael McDowell, and they will switch to Toyota. I think the 38 charter is going to be going over to the Kurt Busch's team next year, and that's where it's going to happen. There's, like I said, it's been rumored for a while that a partnership was probably going to happen with the organization. It got reported all the way back in late August I think it was during the Indy Road Course weekend, it had reported that this was pretty much expected to happen at this particular moment. So I think that that is what's going to happen going into next year. The other big question right now is what happens to Anthony Alfredo going into next year. Well, Casey Campbell had an interview recently with them, and they said that they are still talking to Anthony Alfredo. There's also talk that Front Row Motorsports going into next year, they may be going to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. So here's what I think could happen in regards to these three. I think Michael McDowell will be driving the 34 full-time as a Toyota next year in a partnership with 2311 Racing and Toyota. I think that they're going to go to Xfinity, and I think that Todd Gilliland is going to go to their Xfinity Series program on a full-time basis next year. Todd Gilliland's been really solid in the Truck Series. I know that there may have been talk maybe he go to Xfinity, but I do think with like the Fords and Team Penske on a part-time basis, but I do think that he will go with Front Row Motorsports as a Toyota team. And I think that Anthony Alfredo, I know this for some of you Anthony Alfredo fans, I do think you're not going to be happy about this, but I think that Anthony Alfredo is going to get dropped all the way back down to the Truck Series. However, I think he's going to eventually be able to work his way back up, and I think that we're going to see him go up to the back, maybe eventually back up the Cup with Front Row in the foreseeable future. I'll talk first, though, about 2311 Racing's for potential future. It's really cool to see that we're going to have Kurt Busch coming over to this team. Kurt Busch is going to be hugely beneficial and a huge asset to the organization as a whole. And I think that with Kurt coming to this team next year, I think it's just going to make 2311 Racing a much better team. Even after coming off a win this past weekend at Talladega with Bubba Wallace picking up their first win, I think he's going to be a huge asset to this team going forward. And I'm really excited about the future with Kurt Busch. So, anyway, that is for today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel with notifications so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support our page as well. Links description below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. When do you think the announcement for the charter for them to acquire is going to get announced, and do you think they're acquired from Front Row Motorsports? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we talked about today on the channel? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.